Week 2 is here. Take it away.
Go Vikings, let's win this game. Go Vikings, honor your name. Go get that first down, let's get a touchdown. Rock 'em, sock 'em, fight, 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 fight. Go Vikings, run up the score. You'll hear us yell for more. Sing, tight, sing, tight,
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of Viking Spin. I'm your host, Jason, and we're going to preview the Vikings versus the Steelers here in Week 2. This matchup coming up at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. So we will get to first some of the team news from last week, and then we'll get into the injury reports and, of course, the matchups concerning the Vikings and Steelers individual units on offense, defense, and special teams. First, for team news, Vikings quarterback Sam Bradford was named the NFC Offensive Player of the Week. He was 27 of 32 for 346 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. A hell of a game for Sam. So congratulations to him and the Vikings, of course, on their 29-19 victory over the Saints on Monday Night Football to open up the season at US Bank Stadium. The Steelers also won their opening game, which was last Sunday against the Cleveland Browns. So both teams coming to this game 1-0. And so let's take a look at the injury reports here. For the Vikings, this is as of today, Friday, September 15th. The Vikings have 3 players who are quote-unquote questionable for Sunday's game. Now, of course, they don't have the probable designation anymore, so it's either questionable, doubtful, or out. Since they don't have probable anymore, it looks like the the Vikings have Bradford, Barr, and Rhodes as questionable, but Sam Bradford practiced all week, albeit on a limited basis, nursing a knee injury. Wouldn't be surprised to see him wearing a knee brace, and maybe the Vikings are going to try some more of their quicker passes to get the ball out fast while Sam nurses that. It's just some soreness, though. He had an MRI on it apparently, and the MRI was negative, so that's a good sign. They've just been cautious with him this week to allow that to heal up nicely. Mike Zimmer said that he expects him to play on Sunday, and he also expects Anthony Barr to play. Now, Anthony Barr did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday, but he did return to practice today on a limited basis. So that's probably the biggest question mark, I would say, going into it, but it sounds like Zimmer is saying that he'll play. Perhaps Barr's snaps may be limited in this game, so you might see some combination of Eric Wilson and Emmanuel Lemur maybe getting some snaps, but Barr is probably going to play in this game, at least for some part of it. Also, Xavier Rhodes, who is listed as questionable. He practiced Wednesday, was limited on Thursday, and was also limited today. I'm expecting that he'll play as well. Everyone's been talking about the Rhodes versus Antonio Brown matchup, and we'll get into that. That's coming up. 2 guys from the same hometown area going at it. 2 of the best in the business at their positions, respectively. Also, who was listed on the injury report earlier in the week, but these guys have no no questionable designation, so it looks like they're definitely playing. Emmanuel Lemur was dealing with a hamstring issue, but he, after being limited on Wednesday and Thursday, he was a full participant in practice on today. Also, Terrence Newman fully practiced on Wednesday, was limited Thursday and today. Tremaine Brock and Danny Isidora, who were both held out of last week's game, both guys practiced fully all week long. So Wednesday, Thursday, and today, both Tremaine Brock and Danny Isidora practicing all through the week. So some good news there in that the Vikings will get Tremaine Brock perhaps to see some action this week, in the nickel, I'm assuming. So, he's also, of course, learning the playbook still too. He's only been here a couple of weeks, but it's good to get him back. You want to have as many quality defensive backs as possible throughout the season. So, and then for the Steelers, their backup offensive tackle Gerald Hawkins was labeled as out, so he will not play in the game. Questionable, they have Vance McDonald, the tight end 2 listed. He did not practice on Thursday or today, so my guess is he probably won't play. Stephon Tuitt, their starting defensive end, was a limited participant today after sitting out earlier in the week. He's questionable. J.J. Wilcox, their third safety, is questionable. He was a limited participant today. And then a couple of other guys that are not listed as questionable or out. Looks like they will play, but they're a little bit banged up. Bud Dupree, the starting outside linebacker, and the starting safety, Sean Davis. Those guys will play, but they were limited earlier in the week, and listed on the report. So that is the complete injury report for both teams. So let's take a look at these matchups here that we've got going on. The Vikings offense versus the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Pittsburgh runs a 3-4 defense. That defensive scheme is like the scheme that Green Bay runs. So the Vikings are familiar with the 3-4. They've also faced it last year against the Houston Texans. So I mean, it's not, there's no magic here, but the Steelers do use their own exotic version of it. They like to use a variety of blitz packages, zone blitz packages. So the Vikings will have to be assignment short on the offensive line, and of course with the running backs and pass protection. That's why I suspect the Vikings might try some of their quick hitting passing to limit the effect of that. And now the Steelers, as in terms of their players, Casey Hayward, their starting defensive end, is a really good player. T.J. Watt is a rookie with some promise. He's at outside linebacker along with Bud Dupree. Bud Dupree's kind of been a disappointment at one of the outside linebacker spots for them. It seems like they have with Hayward at defensive end, they have a good nose tackle. Now, the other defensive end there, Tuitt, is a little bit banged up, so he may or may not be able to go. But we'll have to see how that plays out there. But these, there's no Pro Bowl players there. They're decent. They're decent guys, I would say, on their defensive line there. Ryan Shazier is one of their inside linebackers. He's probably the best linebacker that they've got Of course, they've got Lott now, who's a rookie. Now, they did have 7 sacks against the Cleveland Browns, but let's not forget they played against Deshaun Kaiser, who's a rookie quarterback. And looking at the film there, he was holding onto the ball way too long. Not sure of what he was seeing out there. Sam Bradford is, of course, much more comfortable in the Vikings offense and is an experienced veteran that gets the ball out a lot quicker. So I don't expect to see that. But, you have to be cognizant of some of the pressure that they might throw at you. But then you go on to the back end of their unit is probably their weakness, is their secondary. They have their top cornerback is Joe Hayden, who had a solid career with the Cleveland Browns, but has been declining the last couple of years. Didn't look particularly great against the Browns last week. And then Artie Burns is their other cornerback. Nothing really to write home about there. And their safeties, Sean Davis is a little bit banged up. I mean, the team doesn't really have an elite secondary. I mean, this isn't the, Dick LeBeau's Steelers or the Steel Curtain by any means. The Steelers are pretty much now an offensive football team. That's the strength of their team. In the past, they did have some really good defenses, but that's not really the case right now. They're kind of rebuilding their defense in the middle of a rebuild with their defense. So that's what's going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers defensively. I think if the Vikings can come out and establish the running game, that will limit what Pittsburgh can do in terms of their blitzes. The Vikings could try some screens to beat those zone blitzes. Those could be very effective, of course, with Dalvin Cook and the athletic Vikings offensive line, guys like Pat Elflein, Nick Easton and Joe Berger getting out there in space, to throw some blocks downfield for Dalvin Cook. I would look for the Vikings to use some of that stuff to slow down the Pittsburgh rush. And, I think that Sam Bradford can find Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen against these cornerbacks pretty good. I like the Vikings matchups there. And I think Kyle Rudolph can have some success against their linebackers as well. And of course with the 3-4, you can always spread them out too, and you go 3 or 4 wide, the three wide and a tight end, or you split your back out wide. You can get them off their game. So, and the Steelers, other reserve cornerbacks are pretty weak. So I could see the Vikings doing some of the spread stuff too. Of course that takes away a lot of the pass rush options. When they have to get their linebackers off the field, or if they keep their linebackers on the field, I think they'd be in a world of trouble there. So there's some things that the Vikings can do. Probably the biggest thing that the Vikings have to worry about when they're on offense is the Pittsburgh Steelers crowd, because they can get very, very loud there. Sam Bradford made a lot of checks at the line of scrimmage last week, so that communication is going to be key. It's going to be nonverbal communication, of course, is going to be important when you have a loud crowd that you're dealing with, too. So, but with that said, I think they can do some things here. And defensively against the Pittsburgh offense, Le'Veon Bell is the best running back in the NFL. Didn't have a great week last week. He's just kind of getting back into the swing of things, just reuniting with the team and still kind of knocking off the rust. So we could be facing him in a good time here. That's week 2. Bell is good running the football, and he's just as good catching the football. He had 75 catches last season in 12 games. So definitely a guy that Roethlisberger likes to throw to out of the backfield. They also split him out wide and in the slot, and he's a good route runner. The Pittsburgh offense, what I saw of it, they like their quick passing game too. The Vikings, to combat that, you don't want to let their receivers get a free release, because I've seen that Roethlisberger likes to throw quick to Antonio Brown, get him out in space, and have him, make a guy miss, and they get first downs that way. What you can do with a guy like that is, if you can bump him at the line of scrimmage, knock the timing route off, and then that gives your pass rushers more time to get to the quarterback and disrupt Roethlisberger. On the other side of the field, they have Martavius Bryant, who's a big jump ball type receiver. He took a year off from football, so he's a little rusty too. Didn't have a great game against Cleveland last week, but he's definitely a playmaker, capable of getting downfield and winning contested catches. My guess is he's going to draw Trey Waynes when Brown is lined up on the outside. Now the Steelers do get creative, just like the Vikings do with Diggs, where they line him up sometimes outside or sometimes in the slot. The Vikings do that with both Diggs and Thielen, really. But if Brown moves to the slot, I don't expect Rhodes to follow him into the slot. Rhodes' strength is as an outside corner. I like Rhodes' chances when he's matched up outside against Brown because you can bump him. In the slot, I would expect to see some combination of, if he's ready and got enough of the playbook down, Tremaine Brock, who's very physical, who could probably provide the best, if he's up to the task, with the playbook, could probably provide the best opposition to slow down Antonio Brown from the slot. Next would be probably Terrence Newman, and then Mackenzie Alexander could get some snaps as well. Alexander did play a heck of a lot better last week than he did in some of those preseason games where he struggled, so that was encouraging to see him kind of get back on track a little bit there too. And so that's what the Vikings would be dealing with if Brown goes into the slot. Outside of those guys, the rest of the guys on the Steelers offense are kind of pedestrian. I believe it's Eli Rogers is one of their other receivers, and Darius Hayward-Bay, Justin Hunter. These are just guys, really. Haven't made too big of an impact. They're not terrible, but they're not spectacular. Jesse James is their starting tight end. He's starting to get better. Trying to replace Heath Miller there. He did score some touchdowns last week, so he does have decent hands. I mean, he's not going to blow by anybody by any means, but he is a pretty good route runner and pretty assignment sure. So he's somebody that Roethlisberger might look to. But if you can take away Antonio Brown as much as you can and limit Le'Veon Bell, I'll take my chances against a guy like Jesse James, especially if Anthony Barr can play a significant number of snaps. Eric Kendricks will probably get some cracks at him too. The Vikings have good cover linebackers. So, and then the special teams, of course, in this game, the Steelers do use Antonio Brown as a punt returner. Of course, we've got one of the best in the business, and Marcus Sherrill. So special teams could definitely play a role here in the return games with some dynamic returners out on the field. I think keys for a Vikings victory here, the toughest thing is that this game is being played on the road. If it's U.S. Bank Stadium, I like our chances better. The Vikings can definitely win this game. It's not an unwinnable game. It's kind of how I looked at the Carolina game last year, and the Vikings actually surprised me and went down and won that game. But it's on the road. It's in a hostile environment, and it's on a short week. The Vikings are nursing some minor injuries here. We'll have to see. But the Vikings definitely have the personnel and the scheme, I think, to deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think it's going to be a close game, and maybe a turnover will decide this game, or maybe a big special teams play will decide it. So we'll have to see how it all shakes out. But that's all we have for this week. Thank you for tuning in to Viking Spin, and we'll see you on the next edition. Take care.